What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic and excellent spirits. First off, I'm not in a spaceship. Just so you know, if you do hear that little hum in the background, it's because I have the AC cranking, because in the Northeast, in the tri-state New York City area that I live in, it has been literally an outdoor oven. We had temps over 100 yesterday. With the heat index, it's going to approach 100 again today. And if yours truly is going to sit in a sweat box, which at times I don't mind, but at the same time, with the light on in front of my face, with the conditions of it being pretty much a sauna in here, if it's an oven outside, so you can only imagine. So my apologies ahead of time if the annoyance in the background from the AC happens to go into this microphone through your speakers, earbuds, whatever it is that you're using to listen to this live stream. So I appreciate that ahead of time. And of course, here we are, late June, the final Wednesday live stream of the month. And as you see there on the graphic, welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by, carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the toy department of life that we know otherwise called sports, among many other things. There's a lot of things I want to touch on here. I appreciate your input. As always, a little housekeeping. I'll get to the comments in a second. In fact, that's going to be the first thing I'll mention. Share your comments, whatever it is I have to say. Please follow up. We could banter back and forth. This is why I do these live streams. Unlike the podcast where it's recorded and posted, and yes, you could certainly follow up with whatever it is that's on your mind, but considering that here in this forum, using this platform, I love it because I interact with you guys and gals, and just to be able to have this platform is enormous. And that's why I love to do it every Wednesday. I may expand at some point, but that's down the road because I have a lot of big things that are coming down the pike that I want to share with you, and I need your input. As I mentioned yesterday, if you follow me on any of the socials, so if you can just hang tight toward the end of the live stream, I'll touch on a few things that I'm working on and also want to get your feedback on what type of content that you want to see from yours truly. So we have that going on, as well as for those who aren't live, that you're watching the replay, still leave a comment. Feel free to share whatever it is that you're thinking, whatever it is that you may be wondering about the live stream, about what's happening in sports. If you want to debate what it is I have to say over the course of the next hour plus, please feel free. Do not be shy. Leave a comment. And like I mentioned, even though this will already be recorded, and if you're listening after the live stream, that's all right, because I'll be more than happy to follow up with whatever it is that you have to say. So I got those two things going on. I also got one other thing I want to just touch on real quick, because before I begin, let me just get here. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to do so. Let me get to the comments real quick to see what we got. My man, how hot is it in Toronto, Brent? I want to know, considering right now, I think it's 90. It's got to be 90 something here in New York. Let's see where we're at. Here it is. It's right after high noon. And there you go. I'm sure you can see that. It's in reverse. It's 94 degrees. It feels like 97. So you know it's going to get, I believe it's going to top off at 96. So another 2 degrees. It may even crack 100 with the heat index. So you already know. And yes, can't hear it. Oh, thanks. I appreciate that, Brent. Thanks for that feedback. So you don't hear the air conditioning. Wonderful. I guess that's the Yeti mic for you. So I appreciate that. And then Everyday Mets, I already see. I'm going to get to them. They might as well have you and I in their bullpen rotation, no matter what. I'm going to touch on the Mets later on. That's one of the graphics. And in fact, I'm curious for you guys that are in the room, would you like for me prior to have a layout as to what it is I'm going to speak about, just so you could get an idea, as opposed to just me, although I have it structured, but you don't know what to expect. And I understand the title kind of gives it away, but still, as I go through my bullet points, maybe to start, is that something that you'd like to see moving forward, especially as we get to the third quarter and the second half of 2025 already, which is just mind-boggling when you think about it. So, yeah, just please leave a comment. And, yeah, the bullpen to the sun and beyond, it is just a disgrace. I'll touch on that later on because I got a couple of jokes that are up my sleeve. So, Everyday Mets, if you can hang in there, I'll be sure to get to the Metsies later. But I'll get your other comment here. I'm pretty sure I jinxed the Mets. I made a friendly bet with my Yankee. Uh-oh. That the Mets are the best team in baseball winning World Series this year. Sorry, Met fans. You know what? 2000, that season, I learned a lot about not talking trash, not getting into it with Yankee fans, not getting into their faces, because ever since the Interleague started in 97. And, of course, the Dave Malicki game, how could you ever forget? What was that, June 16th, 1997, if I'm not mistaken? I think it was June 16th, or maybe it was the 15th. And for Malicki to throw a complete game shutout, first game ever between the Mets and Yanks in the regular season that counted. And not to say that the Mets were going to win these series year in and year out, but obviously the Yanks in 98, we saw the year that they had, 99. I know you had the great comeback, the Matt Franco hit off of Mariano Rivera, and that was when Piazza had that big bomb off of Ramiro Mendoza that Saturday afternoon game, and winning. They won 2 out of 3 that year at Shea, but they did lose 2 out of 3 at Yankee Stadium. But the last game, I know hit a bomb off of Roger Clemens, Mike Piazza. But 2000 after the World Series. Listen, there's still some. I put a lot of stock into watching these games in the regular season. It does mean something, especially when it comes to Met fan and Yankee fans. But I don't talk trash. I don't. If you've followed me for quite some time, I don't say or troll the Yankee fans. I don't say anything to them except for one comment at the end of the year, especially if the Yankees do not win the World Series. And I'm not going to even jinx it right now. But if you, like I said, if you followed me, you already know what I have to say when it comes to the Yankees not winning a World Series. So that's the only thing that I will say in trolling the Yankee fan, because they can win 100 games in a row. They could go into the postseason with the best record in baseball. As long as they don't record the last out of the postseason, then I'm a happy camper until next spring. So I'll just leave it at that. But, yeah, I mean, it's tough. Listen, they were – and I guess you're going to make me go there right now. You know what? What the hell? Let's do it. Everyday Mets, you're on board. Let me get to my topics, because I was going to start off with the NBA. I was going to talk Celtics, the NBA draft, and then I was going to get to the baseball. So let me scroll, and let's get right to it. Where is it? Where's my graphic? There we go. 2 weeks ago tomorrow, the Mets will have completed back-to-back sweeps, albeit against the dregs of the National League. They swept Colorado in Colorado, and they also swept them the weekend before at Citi Field. And then they swept the Nationals, where they had to survive in the ninth inning, speaking of bullpens that you talked about before. And they were 45-24. They had a 4.5-game lead in the NL East, and all was looking fantastic. I mean, there isn't anything that you could moan, complain, bitch. Yeah, all right, Juan Soto may not have gotten off to the greatest starts in the world, and although he's hit some home runs, and the average is slowly but surely creeping up, but yeah, and they've had a lot of injuries. When guys start going down, the Mark Vientos of the world, and then guys are even getting sent down on top of that, whether their name is Francisco Alvarez, whether their name is Luis Angel Acuna. And it's been a situation where the Mets, at that point 2 weeks ago tomorrow, were as surprising and as shocking of a start that you could possibly ever get, considering their rotation, which has pitched good, and their bullpen has hung in there. But now, over the last 2 weeks, it has been a flat-out disaster. When you lose 10 of 11, and I understand you're going to have ebbs and flows of seasons. I understand that you're going to have losing streaks. All right, 4 or 5 in a row. But 10 out of 11? And I understand that you're going up against teams in your division. You lost 2 out of 3 in Philadelphia. You snapped a 7-game losing streak in Philadelphia with all those home runs that they hit on Saturday. But I'm sorry. The Braves have had, for them, a god-awful year. What are they, 34-39, even as of this very moment? And to think that they're actually 5-0 against the Mets? 5-0. It is actually, I don't want to go as far as saying mind-boggling, but it is a surprise, considering that although when the Mets go to Atlanta, it always seems to be a horror show. It doesn't matter where they play. It can be the old Fulton County Stadium, Turner Field, now Truist Park, as we saw there last week, especially when they blew the game there on Tuesday night, 4-1 lead, and then, bases clearing double by Marcell Ozuna. But they have not been able to beat the Braves, and they have 2 more games left with them before they go to Pittsburgh over the weekend. And the only thing that I'm going to say right this very moment is that the Mets better get these next 2. I don't want to split. I don't want to hear any of this. Oh, well, and I get it. You got to get 1 before you get 2. And even if they lose today and win tomorrow, all right, I understand. But for a team that has been technically in first place all year, a team that has had one of the better records in the National League, if not the sport, and as I mentioned, teams are allowed to go through bad stretches and losing streaks. But to lose 10 of 11, and their pitching staff is now, let's face it, although intact, but they're in shambles. Kodai Senga, who knows when he's going to come back. Sean Manaea had another setback, so who knows when he's going to be able to toe the rubber. All right, Frankie Montas last night. Listen, 5 innings, 3 runs. 3 runs, 3 hits, 3 walks. And I believe he had 5 strikeouts. Listen, I'll take that all day and twice on Sunday. And for him, hopefully he gets into a little bit of a groove and kind of balances out that rotation, because Griffin Canning, who pitched pretty well there after the slow start in Philadelphia on Saturday. But Clay Holmes, you can't go 5 innings. And I understand this is more on the manager than it is for the pitcher himself, Clay Holmes. But 2 outings ago, if I'm not mistaken, was it the game in Colorado? No, it was – he pitched a game where he threw 5 innings and had 79 pitches. Why is he out of the game? And I understand the metrics, and they're going to look at the iPad as opposed to the eye test. And even though Mendoza has a good gut, but, oh, man, to me, I'm just flabbergasted by how this rotation has all of a sudden fallen apart. And I understand Dave Peterson's been solid. I can't get on him, but the other night, but it's one of those things where there's another month until we get to the trade deadline. We know that David Stearns, he's going to be working the phones to try to bring any reinforcements. And let's cut right to it. This bullpen now, and I understand it's a product of the starting pitching. We understand that this is not 1987 where pitchers are going to go minimum 6, 7 innings, and then you hand it off to your bullpen. Technically, back then, you'd like to go 7, maybe into the 8th, if not the 9th inning, and then hand it to your closer, and then the game's over. But we understand that that's not baseball in 2025. But when you're bringing in guys like, and I'm going to call him Dirk Diggler, but Dickie Lovelady, I mean, here's a guy that has a name that's built for adult films. Let's just call it as we see it. And I think he wants to be called Dickie Lovelady as opposed to Rich Lovelady, which I'd rather just stick with Rich, if you know what I'm saying. But when you're bringing in guys like that, and no shade, no knock, okay? But might as well just sign me up. Give me a couple of chances coming out of that bullpen, and maybe in the 8th or 9th inning if the Mets are up 7-1 or down 7-1, because this is just, they're from hunger. I mean, the Jose Castillos of the world, and I understand that they've lost 2 of their guys this year, AJ Minter and also Danny Young, and it's a situation where they're literally trying to put this together with Scotch tape and bubble gum. But geez, and I understand pitchers that are on bad teams, the relief pitchers that is, and even starters, they're not going to start pairing off the players way too early in the game. It's not a situation where we're into July, and if we're going to look to try to get a Sandy Alcantara or look to try to get some bullpen help, that teams just aren't going to start giving up their pieces this early in the game. But man, if this bullpen is going to continue to just spring leaks and the rotation, they're not going to give you more than 5 innings. And this bullpen's going to get, it's already taxed. Forget about it's going to get taxed, because it already is if they're bringing in reinforcement after reinforcement. And that's not even a reinforcement if you ask me. So the only thing you can hope for, Met fans, is that their bats, they have to, I can't even say remain hot, because other than the game in Philadelphia, they haven't really scored. And this is a situation where I won't go as far as saying that it's dire, because the Mets still should make the playoffs. Now, you don't want to go in as a 5 or 6 seed. You want to try to get one of the top 3 spots. You don't want to be in a situation where, or especially you don't want to even be a 4 for that matter, because you want to be able to host a wild card round. And if you are a 4, you're going to host. So my bad there is I got my standings and where the teams are slotted all mixed up. And it's still a long way up between now and October. So I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, Jesus, sky's falling. What are the Mets going to do? So on and so forth. No. But, and I would think that they have a handle on this, despite the fact that they're bringing in guys off the street to come out of that bullpen. But they're going to have to, they're going to have to snap out of it and fast, because Philly, they're playing Houston here this week, and they lost last night 1-0. And that's good, because it seems like the division's been hot potato. Because if you remember, prior to the Mets 2 weeks ago when they had that 4.5 game lead, actually the Phillies were in first place as the Mets gave it back to them. And then prior to that, the Mets were in first place pretty much since the time that Philly came to Citi Field there in late April. So, yeah, this Mets team is going to have to shape up here. They're going to have to start hitting. Obviously, the weather's hot. It's warm. The ball should be traveling. out of the ballpark. And it should be a situation where this team, you would think, will start to make the turn here. Now, as it is, next week, we have the Pirates this weekend. They're going to have the Yankees into Citi Field over the 4th of July weekend. So, of course, that's a series that obviously is going to be hotly contested. And I'm sure to a certain extent, Juan Soto is going to want to exact revenge against his ex-teammates, considering how poorly he performed at Yankee Stadium there last month. But overall, I think the Mets team will be fine. And I know David Stearns is going to do so. He's going to have to do something. He's just not going to stand pat. But yeah, it has been ugly to think that this team could actually lose 10 of 11. And it's even more interesting because the team across town, the Yankees, they certainly haven't fared well, other than beating the Orioles 2 out of 3. I mean, they lost 3 out of 4 to the Angels. And now they've already lost a series here to the Reds last night and then the night before, and they're going to go for a sweep there in Cincinnati before they come home this weekend to play the Athletics. So New York baseball right now, it has certainly been a little bit tighter on the collar because teams that have had the division lead, where there was the Mets at 4.5, and look at the Yankee lead. Now they have a 1-game lead over the Rays and I believe 2 over the Blue Jays. So they had a 7-game lead in the division, and all of a sudden that has shrunk to literally a single digit. So it's not about the Yankees at this very moment, but New York baseball overall just had to throw them in the mix, considering that both teams have not played well here over the last few weeks. But as far as the Mets, all you can hope for is that they just win tonight and try to win them all before going to Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh's a team that they should be able to handle. They've been beating up on the bad teams this year, whether it be Miami, whether it be the White Sox, although they lost that last game of the 3 at Citi Field. We saw what they did against Colorado, as I mentioned. So, yeah, there shouldn't be a thing where this losing streak should, or this bad stretch should continue, hopefully after this series. And not to say that the Mets are going to win these next 2. I mean, I hope they do. They better win one of the next 2. They cannot get swept. I mean, could you imagine over the course of a 10-day period that the Mets are going to lose all 7 games to the Braves? And here's what we thought last year, not me, when the Mets on the Monday after the regular season won that crazy game where Lindor hit the home run with Paris Johnson, and obviously Edwin Diaz had to swoop through that 9th inning in order for them to clinch to get into the wild card. And people want to say even then, oh, we finally slayed the Atlanta Beast. We were finally able to get over the hump. Oh, we finally won a big game in Atlanta when it counted. All right, yes, you could look at it that way, but by any means, they have not been able to exercise any of those demons or all the demons that have followed this Met team, whether it be in the old Fulton County Stadium, and even then when they played in that ballpark, because the Braves were getting ready to start that long run from 94 on when they won all those divisions straight. And when they moved to Turner Field, it was after the 96 season. So really all the bad juju and the brutal losses that have taken place between the Braves and Mets have been in Turner Field. But then now Truist Park is all of a sudden, minus the game last year, but Truist Park, go back to 2022 when the Mets had that 1-game lead next to the last game, or I should say next to the last series of the year. And now that all imploded in their face with Max Scherzer, Jacob deGrom, and Chris Bassett on the mound. And they got swept out of Atlanta and lost the division. And we all know they got beat by the Padres in the wild card round. I mean, I tell you, just terrible memories when it comes to the Mets and Braves. So we'll see what's going to happen there. And I don't understand why they cannot beat the Braves. It's not as if they're going to see Chris Sale in the series. Now they've seen both Spencer Schwellenbach and Spencer Strider. But now as we take a look, and real quick, I don't even recall off the top of my head who the Braves are pitching tomorrow and today too while I'm at it. But you would think the pitching matchups should favor the Mets here over the next 2 days. And tonight, yeah, Didier Fuentes and Clay Holmes. I mean, come on. If they can't beat up on Fuentes, I don't know, then there's no hope for them at all. And then tomorrow, they're going to have Grant Holmes and Griffin Canning. So you have arguably the 2 best Met pitchers that are healthy, because Kodai Senga, if he's healthy, he would be the ace of the staff. But let's get these next 2. And Clay Holmes, can you not walk the ballpark, get yourself in trouble, despite the fact that you usually dance through the raindrops and through the minefields to where you do not get affected by getting beat up or lit up by the opposing team? But can you go 6 innings tonight? Griffin Canning, can you do the same there tomorrow night to at least give some of the bullpen a blow? And let's get these next 2 games. So we'll keep an eye on that as the Mets and Braves continue their series. Now, let me get to some of the comments here. I know everyday match. I'm sure you got a few. All right, let's see. All right. All right, Brent, I'll get you a comment in a second. One sort of generational player, the best generational. I mean, how many times have we seen it? You got Piazza, Carlos Beltran, David Wright. I mean, David Wright's not a generational player, but obviously he was a perennial all-star. Beltran coming over. I mean, yeah, it doesn't matter. Now, we'll see. Everyday Mets. I know you got a couple of comments, which I'll get to in a second. But it's one of those things that is just it's just beyond belief when it comes to this team because it can never be easy. And not that I expect it to be easy, but I mean, think about this. In the Mets' best season ever in 86, even that, yeah, regular season may have been cake, won a division in the middle of September, but we saw what happened there in the Houston series and then obviously the World Series Game 6 with the Red Sox. So let's see what your next one is. Rate my trade. I don't know if the Red Sox would do that. And remember, Bregman is free agent. He can opt out. So that's dangerous. And Brandon Sprout, that's a guy. And listen, we need pitching. So how about this? Now, didn't you bring up a couple weeks ago? I think you said Bregman and not Bregman. You said Duran for Jeff McNeil and somebody else, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't think they would take back McNeil. They say, well, what are we going to do with him? Now, yeah, if you want me to rate it, let me see. If I rate that, I'd give it a C for two reasons. I don't hate it, but the only reason why I don't like it is because Bregman could walk after this year. And Duran, I understand he cures your center field ills. And I think he also mentioned Cedric Mullins, too, which I kind of like because he's a stopgap guy. I know just for the rest of this year. And then Chapman, although I think could be good here, he's pitched in New York, but he's also a guy that's a rental, and he's 37 years of age. And you're giving up Sprout, who obviously is their number one prospect, definitely a pitching prospect by far. Beatty, obviously that's the swap there with Bregman and Tong. I understand you got to throw him another player. Yeah, so I'd rate it somewhere in the middle. D-Rels. Mendoza should be held accountable. Listen. Now, Mendoza, you can't – it's tough to get on him right now only because of what he's done since the beginning of June last year and how they had the best record in baseball and got to an NLCS, Game 6, et cetera, and even this year with the way they performed. Yeah, recently not good. But, yeah, I totally agree. He should be held accountable. Now, it's going to be interesting because if they get swept by the Braves here and for whatever the reason, let's say Clay Holmes, he's in the sixth inning, and let's say it's 3-2 Mets, and then he walks the first guy, and then he's going to pull him to bring in the bullpen, and he has like 75 pitches. No. Keep him in the game. You got to have these guys get through these jams. You just can't all of a sudden think that because you're in the third time around the lineup that he walks the first guy, and it's a situation where, now I got to bring in a reliever to go up against Ronald Acuna or go up against Matt Olson or whatever. And to me, that's the thing about baseball in 2025, and it's not just Mendoza, it's everybody. Because in the immortal words of Todd Zeal, if you watch his pre- and post-game, it's about the eye test, not the iPad. And these managers with the front office and the analytic geeks, they try to map out and figure out the game 3 hours before it actually plays out. And that's the problem. It shouldn't be that way at all. So when you have a guy that's has 70-some-odd pitches, and we understand Clay Holmes throws a million sliders. A lot of his pitches are breaking stuff. But you know what? So be it. If he's going to throw 110 pitches, he's going to have to do it. We're in June. July is next week. He's a guy that you're going to have to – I'm not going to go as far as saying stretch him out because he should be stretched out by now. But I don't want to hear, this guy's been a reliever. But no. He's a starter now. So Mendoza, you got to let these guys figure it out. You got to get some length from your rotation. You just can't expect them to, 75, 80 pitches or the first sign of trouble. Well, that's it. I got to pull them. And then you got to depend on your bullpen, which right now is running on fumes. So I totally agree, D-Rels, 1,000%. Do you feel Steve Cohen, AP Casino Plan, Metropolitan Park is the next mayor? I I don't know. I don't know if that would be in jeopardy because part of that plan is to have that stadium for the NYCFC, no? Which will be out center field where all the junkyards are and the chop shops. Listen, I think Steve Cohen, with all the money that he has, I'm sure, sadly, he'll find loopholes and finds a way, unless the new mayor, if he's just going to shoot that down. Yeah, obviously that's out of my range. I don't know if it would be in jeopardy, but because of Cohen and his power, I'm sure he'd probably find a way to see what he could do to get that whole development set up and for that to thrive, because as we all know, I mean, it is a mess back there. And yes, I understand housing and restaurants and bars, which would be great, because other than what's inside Citi Field, and I know you have McFadden's there, there's nothing. There's absolute zilch. So if you do bring that whole Metropolitan Park and have that soccer stadium to go along with more bars and restaurants and places like that, I mean, I think it'd be more of a boon than it would be a bust. So that's a good question. I don't know. Again, I think Cohen probably flex his muscles enough to say, I'm going to get my development underway and rolling. Now, to what degree is that going to hurt us, the taxpayer? Absolutely. You know that. It's not going to be all private money, which is sad, but yeah, D-Rels, exactly. 100%. Goes without saying. So let me see. Now, Everyday Mets. I said, why do we need John Duran and Jeff McNeil got better stats this year? Well, Duran is a guy that I don't know if the Red Sox want to give up on him that simple or that soon. Yeah, he'd be a great fit. Left-handed bat. Yeah, I just don't think the Red Sox will part with him. And then they'll say Jeff McNeil. I'm sure they're going to want to try to take one of the young pitchers, or maybe they want Beatty back because maybe they'll use Beatty as a safety net, considering if Bregman doesn't resign. But now with Devers gone, I'm sure they have all the money that's freed up there in Boston to keep Bregman there long term. Now, I don't know if that means $40 million a year. I don't think Bregman's a $40 million a year player by any stretch. But you can understand why the Red Sox will try to do their best to keep Bregman, despite the fact that he's hurt now and what have you. But yeah, we'll see what's going to happen there. McNeil, I know after this year, he has one more year left on his deal. Now, he's not making a ton. So McNeil, I get it. He's had his moments in a Met uniform, but I don't know what he's got left. And he's just fortunate that the young guys haven't really performed. The Luis Angel Acuñas, and the crazy thing is when he was brought up last year, he was actually getting hits. He's got a few big home runs. And this year, it's like, where did the power numbers go? I'm not trying to say Acuña is like his brother, Ronald, where he was going to put up in his sleep 25, 30 home runs. But yeah, you had not seen the power numbers. And unfortunately, he has not been able to thrive. And you would think that because he was at the bottom of the order and a scenario where a lot wasn't asked of him offensively, it's not as if he had to come close to what Soto, Lindor, Alonso, even Nimmo, what they were going to do offensively. No, if he would have hit 275 and it had maybe 8, 9 home runs by now, he'd still be in the lineup. But obviously, he's nowhere near those numbers. And I'm sure going down to the minors will probably straighten him out and maybe comes back, different perspective, a lot more hunger, and away we go. But yeah, this Met team has to turn it around, and they have to do it. I don't want to go as far as saying fast, as I mentioned, but yeah, you don't want to be in a situation where you're going to fall 4 or 5 games back in the division and be in a situation where you're gunning for a wild card spot with teams that have actually been able to play pretty well here. The Cardinals have played well. They've beaten the Cubs the first 2 games here in this week. They got a 4-game series and can actually come close to tying them. I believe they're 2 in the loss and 2.5 back in the NL Central. So teams like that, the Brewers, we know about the Padres, the Giants. You don't want to be mixed with those teams. You want to at least win a division, maybe have a bye. I understand it's a long way off. We're approaching the exact halfway point of the year, but I don't, for whatever the reason. And when you think about it, the Mets have actually hit the halfway point at 46-35. So right now they're on pace to win 92 games. You'd like to see them win more. 92, I don't think he's going to win this division. Probably 95, 96 will. And if that's the case, chances are, all right, even if they are a 4 seed, they could still host a home playoff series. But we've seen that happen before 3 years ago. And how did that turn out? And it's not to say the same thing's going to happen again this year if that were to be the case, but you get where I'm coming from. So, yeah, that's what I got with the Mets. If you guys in the room, you want to keep talking Mets, please feel free to do so. Throw it up in the chat. We'll get into that. Now, yeah, real quick, I want to get to the AL East. NL. I talked a little bit about the NL Central, and only because Cubs are playing the Cardinals, and the Cardinals, they've won the first 2 games, have 2 more games left. AL East, as you see there, I talked about it earlier with the Yanks just 1 up on the Rays and the Jays. And the Yanks, who got Luke Weaver back, and good for them. It was supposed to be a 4 to 6 week injury. He comes back in 3 weeks, so that's a big boon. But the thing with the Yankees is that if Judge isn't hitting, who else is picking up the slack? You know, the Trent Grishams of the world, the Jazz Chisholms. You know, it's not as if they have – it's interesting. The Yankee lineup is good, but it's not prolific. And not because Soto's now in the Mets and Giancarlo, I know, understand he's back in the mix. But if Judge isn't hitting, that means you got to rely on guys who, yeah, maybe by name have done it in the past or have had their moments, but that's not going to cut it. You know, Anthony Volpe, for all the talk of him coming in his rookie year and, oh, this is Derek Jeter 2.0, so on and so forth. No, that's not the case. Or Paul Goldschmidt, where I understand he's still been tremendous this year. Nobody expected him to bat 340 all year, but, you know, he's come back to the pack a little bit. And now that you're hitting the dog days of summer, who knows if the wear and tear and how that's going to play out here as we get deeper into the season. And Judge, you knew he was going to cool off, despite the fact he still hit a home run there the other night against the Reds. And it's one of those things where the Yankees, just like the Mets, they're going to be fine. Whether they win a division or not, they're going to make it to the postseason. I think they're going to win the division. If you ask me, the Yankees have a much better shot of winning the division than the Mets because the Phillies are that much more of a threat than the Blue Jays, Rays, or even the Red Sox, if they get hot, are. And the Red Sox have beaten the Yankees 5 out of 6 this year, as you know. But, yeah, I think they'll be perfectly fine. The thing is with the Yankees is not only their rotation, but their bullpen. And it's a similar situation because their bullpen, as good as it's been, but when you get to October and you have a manager like Aaron Boone, iPad, eye test, right away, that's where his bullpen gets lit up. And that's why, as we've seen in the past, postseasons with him, even as early as last year, granted they beat the Royals and Guardians to get to a World Series, but he mismanaged his bullpen in game 1, as you know, and we saw what happened there. More so, that was with Garrett Cole in the game 5 meltdown there with the Judge fly ball and the Volpe play, and then, of course, Cole not going to first base on the grounder, which would have ended the inning at 5-0, I might add. But it's a situation where both New York teams, I think, will be fine, although they are certainly flawed and far from perfect. But I think they'll do just enough come the deadline to bring back guys that will play key roles down the stretch. And how they pan out, obviously, we'll have to wait and see. And we don't know who those cast of characters are because when we get to about this time next month, because the deadline is what, July 30th, if I'm not mistaken. So plenty of time between now and then. And obviously, we got a lot more to talk about that in the weeks to come, as well as, of course, the podcast coming at you tomorrow there, Apple, Spotify, jreels.com, and as well as the YouTube channel at jreels. All right. Let me get to a couple NBA things. And again, you want to keep the comments with the baseball, please feel free. Just because I changed gears, it's not a thing where, I'm going to stop talking about the Mets or baseball, what have you. So please feel free to chime in. Now, the Celtics retool. Now, is this a retool or is this a reset? I think it's more of a retool because I don't think this team, despite the fact that they traded both Drew Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis, now, yes, it is a reset, but I think they're going to retool because they, I believe, have the not only the wherewithal now since they got under the second apron, and we know about the luxury tax, and just a quick first grade explanation of the second apron with the NBA, with the Celtics paying both Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum average over $60 million a year. It doesn't leave you much for the rest of your team, because the NBA, with the recent collective bargaining agreement, they want to avoid having the super team. So it means as the top 3 guys or the big 3, whatever you want to call it. And even though there's still some big 3s laying around, but unless you want to pay that luxury tax and unless you want to have to deal with that second apron, then yeah, you're going to pay through the nose to have 3 players on your team or more that are going to make more than max money, or max money, I should say, and it's going to stymie your luxury tax bill and even your salary cap. So with Kristaps, who had $30 million coming this year, Drew Holiday, who the Celtics gave an extension last year after they won a championship. As a matter of fact, I think it was during the playoffs where they gave him a 4-year, whatever it was, $135 million contract. And we saw that there were a few warts with him in his game, especially in that series against the Knicks. And because I believe he's going to be 35 this year, if he hasn't already turned 35, and they have a guy in Derek White who's younger, who's a better shooter, who is as good of a defender as Drew Holiday. So you would think they're going to keep him. Now, mind you, he's making $28, $29 million a year. So although they're under that second apron, but the luxury tax, although they've cut that to 180, but they want to have some more flexibility. So that means if they're going to start bringing in players, whether it was Anthony Simons from Portland in the deal for Drew Holiday, which I thought was very shrewd. Now, he doesn't play any defense, but who knows? Maybe he'll expand his game a little bit when it comes to training camp and knowing what the Celtics are going to try to deploy defensively, even with Simons maybe being a liability. But we know he could shoot, he could score. As we all know, the Celtic MO is to take 1,000,000 threes. So let's see how that pans out. So that's why I think it's a bit more of a reboot, because with the way the Eastern Conference has unfolded, obviously with Tatum out and trying to field a roster that's going to be respectable enough to maybe get to 50 wins and roll the dice and see how far they could go in the playoffs, considering that they won a title just last year. And with Indiana not having Tyrese Halliburton, and with Damian Lillard also out with that same injury, and who knows if Giannis is going to get traded to the Western Conference. Philly, although they have the 3rd pick in the draft tonight, but with Joel Embiid, you don't know his status and what he's going to be moving forward. He's certainly not going to be the bionic man, a la Steve Austin, the $6 million man. I'm dating myself, but if you go back to the 70s, I'm sure you get that reference. So with that, and with a lot of the East, which is still a bit of a question mark, and that also includes the Cleveland Cavaliers winning 64 games, but getting bounced in the second round the way they did. Can you trust them to have another big season and go deep into the playoffs next year? I can't trust them. Detroit, a young team that needs some veteran presence, that knows how to win. And I'm sure it was a great learning experience. Do you expect them to get to a conference final next year? Another big question mark. The Knicks, yes, for everything that they did this past postseason, but now they're still looking for a head coach, and that head coach could be an assistant from the Minnesota Timberwolves. You think the Knicks fans are going to be happy with that? I think not. So this is a scenario where the East, and even Orlando, they bring in Desmond Bane, a little bit too rich for my blood, for 4 unprotected first-round picks. But yes, he's going to add some defense. He's going to add some scoring, three-point shooting, etc. But is Orlando ready to make that next leap? So that's why it is wide open in the East next year. So even with the Celtics making these trades and knowing that they had to do right by their economic system and know that the new ownership that's coming in, that they weren't going to be a part of a roster with all this money that's owed to them, and then on top of that to have to pay this luxury tax and deal with the second apron, they said, we're not doing it. And it's been evidenced by what we've seen here the last 2 days, which I think is what they had to do. I'm sorry to see Drew Holiday go. I wish that wasn't the case, but sadly, he becomes a casualty in this regard. And for Kristaps Porzingis, I get it. We're going to remember game 1 of the 2024 NBA Finals until we're blue in the face. And he had some moments in the regular season 2 years ago and a couple here this year coming back from injury. But what did he give you here in this postseason? Didn't give you much, if not anything. So it's one of those situations where I'm more sad to see Drew go than Kristaps, but those are 2 key pieces to their championship puzzle here over the last couple of years, and now they're not there. So how they're going to be able to roll the dice, whether it's the Anthony Simons of the world or if they go another route and try to bring more pieces in, that we'll have to see what Brad Stevens and company are going to do, and I'll be all over that. So that's what you have there with the trade and Kristaps, and more to come in regards to that. And then the latest sports epidemic. Now, to me, I'm going to look at these Achilles injuries. It's almost I don't want to go as far as saying it's almost. I was about to say something which would have been a little bit off the rails. But what it is right now, it's becoming the UCL or the Tommy John of the baseball pitcher and now to the basketball player. Because as we've seen here with the aforementioned Lillard, Halliburton, and Jason Tatum, these guys are going down like flies. And I understand that there were some comments made in regards to, wear the low-cut sneaker as opposed to the three-quarter. You need to have the high tops back. And there have been some NBA players that refuted that. They said, there's no scientific evidence, which there's not. Now, is that part of the problem? Maybe wearing the low-cut sneakers? It could be, but we don't know that for sure. And granted that these players that have gotten injured have worn the low-cut or the three-quarter high-top shoes. So, right, it's easy to point the finger at the sneakers itself. But that's almost saying the same thing when the Yankees had the torpedo bats at the beginning of the year and how everybody went crazy. The reason why the Yankees hitting all these home runs are because of the torpedo bats. But no, there's also other teams that have been using the torpedo bats as well. So you just can't automatically assume that the torpedo bats are the catalyst to why you had all those home runs by the Yankees in the first 3 games of the first week of the season. Just like this can't be the catalyst for why guys are blowing out their Achilles. Now, hopefully it's not going to be an epidemic to where you're going to see a lot of these starting next year or in preseason, et cetera. But I will say that with a lot of the wear and tear, and although medicine and science has evolved a lot more than it has in the 80s, and mind you had guys playing in the 80s, 78, 80, 82 games a season. They never slowed down. And mind you, they didn't have to travel then the way they do now, where all the teams have charters and everybody has food delivered to them. And it's top-notch food, or they could get top-notch food. It's not a situation where guys, I'm sure, were grabbing anything from the airport terminal to bring onto their commercial flight. That's right, commercial flight to fly to the next city, where I'm sure it was a greasy hamburger or a terrible sandwich or what have you. So they're not getting anything gourmet back then the way they are today. But there could be something said for the amount of games from AAU, high school, from college, or if you don't go to college, overseas to the NBA, and the wear and tear and the travel. Listen, I get that, but there has to be a way to where these injuries, maybe it is the shoes. And I can't say that I'm not surprised if it is the shoe, but we don't know that just yet. We'd have to wait and see on whether or not guys with calf strains or guys that have these issues with their lower leg regions, that a lot of the coaches and the GMs, they're certainly going to have their antenna up to think that, wait, you have a calf strain? No, we're sitting you out. Doesn't matter. Because they already know if you blow out a tire, you are done for the year. Similar to baseball, when you blow out your elbow, that's it. See you in a year and a half, which is pretty much the timetable for an Achilles injury. It's 8 to 12 months, but you don't come back from these suckers like a torn ACL, which used to be a death knell for the NFL running back or an NFL player. As we all know, that's a situation where the advancement of technology, science, medicine, et cetera, has made the ACL an injury where the recovery time isn't 8 to 12 months. It's pretty much 6 to 8 months right now. So with the season over, there isn't anything to discuss, and there are no Olympics. But this is one thing that I'm sure will be monitored a lot as you get closer to the end of summer into the early part of fall, when training camp begins, media day, and everything that's going to be asked by the media as far as these injuries, what they could do to prevent them, how they could feed their bodies even better to avoid having this catastrophic injury, which is going to put you on the shelf for a year and a half. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack when it comes to that injury. And listen, I don't have the answer for that. Maybe it is the sneakers, maybe not. And this is non-contact. So this isn't a thing where they're bumping into one another. No, it's just that one step that literally changes the trajectory of their career or even seasons for that matter, as we saw with the Bucks, Celtics, and Pacers here just this postseason alone. So that's what you have with the Achilles. Now the NBA draft tonight in 2 parts, and this is my first gripe. Really? Why is the NBA, and I understand they're trying to capitalize on what we've seen with the NFL, with the round 1 on Thursday, rounds 2 and 3 on Friday, and then 4 through 7 on Saturday. The NBA has 2 rounds. And we know that there have been some second-round picks that have flourished into all-NBA players. The most notable one is Nikola Jokic, but you've had Draymond Green, you've had Jalen Brunson. I mean, I could go through a whole laundry list. And then, of course, last year, the biggest one of all, Bronny James. I know I say that tongue-in-cheek, but this is a thing where the NBA is trying to maximize and trying to get not only eyeballs to the sets, but to try to have the 2 nights. But here's the problem with that. The NBA doesn't have the quality of depth when it comes to talent to have this aired over the course of 2 nights, because half of these players play overseas. We've never seen them a second in our lives. And a lot of these guys we haven't even either heard of from the collegiate level, albeit overseas. And yeah, we could follow college basketball and get into it, but there are guys that we have never seen, heard of, etc. So when you get to tomorrow night, I mean, it's not as if you're going to have guys in the second round that, yeah, they may have played at big schools, but they're not going to be big-time names. This isn't a situation where the second round in the NFL, it's important because the second round, you can still get great talent. Obviously, there's more rounds, a lot more talent to fill out a roster. I get it. It's 53 as opposed to 15 in the NBA, but I don't know where the excitement comes in on day 2, because once you get past the first 15, 16, maybe 17 picks in the NBA draft, then it's a slog. It's not as if you're going to have a situation this past NFL draft where a Shedeur Sanders is going to drop to the 5th round as he did. I know last year was the whole thing with Bronny, but we knew he was going to the 2nd round, but is he going to get drafted by the Lakers? As we all saw, yeah, that's what happened. You don't have a situation like that this year. I mean, if anything, the one guy, and I'm going to get to that next as far as the storylines, but I'm going to talk about Ace Bailey from Rutgers, where a lot of people look at him as the guy because he didn't go to any of these pre-draft workouts, combines, etc., and he's been a mystery because a lot of people think he's should be a number 2, number 3 overall talent, but because you haven't seen him over the last month or so, there may be instead of buyer beware, a drafter beware. But how I look at it is, once you get past those first 9, 10, 11 picks, and people could say, oh, yeah, well, it's still deep. You can still get a quality player there late in the first round, or, oh, this guy could fall into the second round, whatever. It does not have the same A, following, and B, it does not have the same charm or passion or fervor. It just doesn't. And yeah, they're going to be guys that you've heard of and played in college that are going to be drafted in the second round. But yeah, it's not a thing where you're going to be head over heels on a guy to be, oh, wow, we got this guy in the second round. Because a lot of those guys, in the grand scheme of things, do they really pan out? A majority of them don't. So why they separated this to 2 nights is beyond me. Just have it the one night. I mean, I know why they're doing it. I mean, it's no secret. It's about money. It's about stretching out the draft. It's only 2 nights. It's only 2 rounds. But, they're going to do what they're going to do, but they're not fooling the true sports fan, because it's not as if they have 20 or 30 guys that could come out over these 2 rounds to where, oh, well, yeah, that guy is definitely going to be a second-round pick. Oh, wow, I see him falling in the draft. Oh, very rare in the NBA. So we'll see. Starts tonight. I'll talk a lot about the first round tomorrow on the podcast. And as far as the storylines go, we know that the first one is going to be Cooper Flagg, or at least so we think, that the Mavericks are going to draft him, considering the whole Luka mess from the February 1st trade between the Lakers and the Mavericks. So you bring him in, and I know Kyrie signed an extension, 3 years, where he's on the mend from his ACL injury. Not as if he's going to be back day one, but you would think or even hope that if you're a Maverick fan, that you could get Kyrie healthy, clean bill of health, ready to go, and maybe after the All-Star break at the earliest, or if not the latest, maybe late March into April, so you could gear him up for a few games and then maybe see if you can go on a playoff run. It's almost as if you got him in a deadline deal, because the trade deadline is usually the first week of February. So Cooper Flagg to me is the no-brainer. I would think that the Mavericks, as much as they waited for this moment, but to have him there after the whole Luka fiasco, you know that they will be doing cartwheels and backflips on the inside, not on the outside. And if they could, I'm sure they would. But that's the storyline number one. Also, Ace Bailey's the other one, I think. He's a mystery. A lot of people knows that. A lot of people feel like he's going to have a big-time career. Where he ends up, who knows? He didn't want to work out for the Sixers or Charlotte or teams like that. He figured, maybe he wants to go 6 and after. All right. Let's see how that plays out. If a team above that, whether it's the Utahs of the world, or I don't think San Antonio is going to take him, but you get where I'm coming from when it comes to a guy who is a big-time talent and is hoping to fall deeper into the first round, as opposed to being that guy, I want to be the number 2, number 3, even number 1 pick overall. Well, we know number 1, obviously, Cooper Flagg, or at least what we think, is going to go to Dallas. But other than that, because, again, I've said the players overseas, I have not seen them. Couldn't even spot them out of a lineup or tell you how good they are. All you hope for is that whomever the organization that you root for, whomever they choose, is the right guy, right fit, etc., and will blossom and flourish to, if not an all-star player, you want more. You want him to be an all-NBA player, preferably first team. So I'll talk more about round 1, like I said, tomorrow, and I'm sure there are going to be some trades that will transpire between now and then. But the NBA draft is just hours away as we look forward to it on the other side of Brooklyn there at the Barclays Center. All right, I see a comment. Let's get to that. All right, Brent. Let's do more emphasis on prevention. Yeah. But it's hard. No, it's okay. May have to give me a second. Oh, no. The scenario regarding prevention is load management. And, of course, a lot of people don't want to see that. But even still, all it takes is that one step. We've witnessed it several times in this playoff. And, yeah, guys, you want to see them play. And you know they're not going to abort the season or cut the season revising it by playing 68 games. That isn't happening. So the only way you prevent it is strength training and keeping yourself in the best shape possible. That is it. Because, and I'm sure these guys are in the gym and they're squatting and doing whatever it takes to get their legs on point, because it's such a vital part of the game, obviously. But yeah, I mean, in order to prevent, it is very tough. But you hit it around the head there, Brent. How guys, Wemby and Chet, those are 2 guys. They're tall, they're lean. I mean, we've seen this a million times over the years, whether you're Sean Bradley. I won't go as far as saying like Manute Bol and George Murasan, but those are guys that were 7'6", 7'7". They were enormous guys, but they were lean. They were thin. And I know I'm missing a player or 2. Sam Bowie wasn't as tall or as thin as them, but he had leg issues pretty much coming out of college in Kentucky. When he got drafted there by Portland, sandwiched between Michael Jordan and Clyde Drexler. So, yeah, it's tough. That's a tough call to see what they would do to prevent that. Let me see what you got here. I agree with you on the second round, but Bronny went 55th. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously we've been on that road, and that wasn't a shock to see Bronny go to the Lakers. It was almost as if once you got closer to that 55th pick, I'm sure people realize and recognize, like, no, we're not going to draft him out of spite or whatever. So, and obviously we know what happened after that. And Brent, I think load management, that is. And nutrition. I mean, it's weird. I know that. Now, I understand it's a hamstring. It's not an Achilles, because a hamstring, you can pull it, you can pop it, and that's not as severe as an Achilles, but I've heard from baseball players, former Major League Baseball players, that the reason why that a lot of these hamstring injuries crop up and groins and things of that nature, it's not a matter of stretching, is that these players do not run. And what I mean by that is that they're not on a treadmill. They're not really concentrating on trying to get the cadence and the rhythm of having your body run more naturally, as opposed to just doing sprints in the outfield before a game. Or, yes, if you are doing work outside of the stadium facility, etc., the old resistance running with the parachute or with the strong resistance bands, I mean, that stuff is great. That stuff works. And by any means, I'm not a strength and conditioning coach, but when I hear that stuff about the baseball players saying that, yeah, they need to be running more. They need to be out there to get their legs more limber and more, because as we all know, baseball is a start and stop. There is a lot of cutting, and generally players, they can work their lower bodies with the squats and do all the deadlifts, do all those things, but it's trying to keep yourself loose, and not just by stretching, it's the running. And I found that fascinating, because running in a sport where you run a lot, I'm sure it's the last thing that players think of, because they're always on their feet. They're always out there running the bases or the outfield or base paths, etc. But it makes sense, because that is your key job. You would think that a lot of those injuries could be prevented by just running. And not to say you got to run 5-6 miles a day, but they said, oh, even if you just went for a 2-3 mile jog, and what that does for your legs, believe it or not, it is become a lost art. And when I heard that from the players, or some of the players, it made a lot of sense. There are teams that have bike on the floor. Yep. Yeah, you see that in the NBA a lot, which is fine, because, right, you don't expect them to, I mean, you may see them run underneath the arena, and not that they're doing that on purpose to run, but, you know, whether to keep loose or not, but that's what they have the bike for, because it's stationary. You don't want to get gassed running in the tunnels and the annals of your home arena, or on the road for that matter. So, yeah, no, those are great points there, Brent. And again, I'm far from a strength and conditioning coach or whatever, but this is obviously what I see, what I read, etc. And to me, it just all adds up. It makes sense. All right, let me get to, yeah, we did the baseball. Oh, yeah, I got to call out some fans here. Whether it was the fan, where was that? It wasn't in Pittsburgh, but Dennis Santana, the reliever, but more so yesterday in Chicago, the South Side, where they banned this fan, not only from the stadium last night, but now officially banned, if I'm not mistaken, not from Chicago, maybe elsewhere, wherever you may travel. So this fan had the nerve to get on Ketel Marte of the Arizona Diamondbacks, shouting out, and it wasn't released as to what was said, but saying just terrible things about his mom, whose mom perished in a car accident 8 years ago. Now, why are you bringing this up is beyond me. Can we just start there? Number one. And number two, if that's what you're going to do to heckle players, now you want to say, you suck, or go home, or take a seat on the bench. Great. Don't start doing that. And I don't want to hear, I paid my ticket, I can do what I want. Yeah, you can, but no, that's not what you should do. That's like me going to that guy's job. If his mother or father or someone close to him in his life passed away, and I go to his job and I see him from across the way and I yell at him like, hey, so-and-so and so-and-so, oh, well. I mean, seriously? You guys got to be better than that. I mean, that is just a travesty, and I'm glad that person got banned, because that is just beyond inexcusable. So I just had to put that out there for the hell of it. All right, now real quick, before I get to the big question I want to ask you guys, I need your input on, and I see we got 5 people in the chat. I know we're past an hour here, and I'll get to that next comment in a second. A couple of quickies. Islanders on the clock. They had the number 1 pick overall in the draft. Why could it be next year? Or even last year. I mean, think about this. I mean, this is typical Islanders. When you look at the last, including next year, 4 years. 2 years ago was Connor Bedard. Blackhawks drafted him. Supposed to be a generational player. Last year, the San Jose Sharks draft Macklin Celebrini, another guy that could be a generational player. Then you have this year, who the Islanders, they may draft Matthew Schaefer, the defenseman, or they could go James Higgins, who is a Long Island product from Hauppauge and went to Islander games as a kid. So I don't know if they're going to be sentimental because right now they got to get the pick right. The last time they had the first pick overall was a guy named Jonathan Tavares, and he was a guy that, all right, maybe not be generational, but certainly was going to be a guy that is your face of the franchise, which he was before he went to Toronto, as we all know. But, and then next year you have the guy that could be better than Celebrini and even maybe Bedard, and that is a one Gavin McKenna, who's coming out next year. But this year is Matthew Schaefer. No offense. I've never seen Matthew Schaefer play, but the Islanders and their new regime there with Lou Lamoriello gone, and now a lot of it has been questioned about whether or not the Islanders are going to trade this pick. And there's no way. They said that, hey, we're open to anything and everything, but chances are that they're going to make that pick and keep the pick, I should say, whether it's Schaefer or somebody else, that remains to be seen. And that'll be Friday night. But the Islanders need anything and everything because this organization right now, I understand early in the decade they made it to back-to-back conference finals. One wasn't a conference final, it was more of a semifinal. But, yeah, they got to do something because the Panthers aren't going anywhere. The East is still relatively loaded. Toronto's still a very good team. Tampa's still very good. The Capitals, can they repeat what they did last year? Who knows? Carolina, steady, not spectacular, but very good. Rangers, you know they're going to try to make a big splash. So, yeah, in order for them to be relevant, they got to do something. And having this number one pick is big, but obviously it's not along the likes of a generational player. So that we'll have to wait and see. And this is for you, Brent, real quick. I know the Hockey Hall of Fame class of 2025 has come out, and the four big players are Joe Thornton, Alexander Mogilny, Zdeno Chara. I'm missing one more. I know it was four big ones. Thornton, Chara, Mogilny. I got to look this up. I should know that. It's a bad job on my part. Maybe did I jot this down? There were four guys. Oh, and Duncan Keith. Now, I got to look up Duncan Keith because I don't know. Did he ever win a Norris Trophy? Defenseman, played with the Blackhawks, won the 3 cups. Then he went to Edmonton, which I thought was a great pickup, but then obviously that didn't work out. I'm pulling up Duncan Keith's stats now, and I get it. He's a stay-at-home defenseman. He's not going to wow you with his stats. But to me, what I'm going to see here is how many – he won 2 Norris trophies, was in the running. Duncan Keith's not a Hall of Famer. I know he won 3 cups, 2 Norris. To me, he's borderline. I mean, Duncan Keith, if he's going to be in the Hall of Fame, and I can even say the same for Zdeno Chara. Now, I understand Chara played forever, just like Joe Thornton, played forever. But those guys are more compilers, and they had dominant stretches. I get it. But to me, I'm a stickler for the Hall of Fame. I'm a small room guy. I'm not a guy that's just going to let everybody in. And I understand why Chara and Thornton are going to get in. They both played 22, 23 years in the sport. But I like dominance. I like guys who, when you hear the name, oh, yeah, that's a lock. And Thornton has black type by his name. Not a lot, but he has black type. And listen, I'm not going to say look up Wayne Gretzky. I mean, we all know Gretzky's one of the greatest, forget about hockey players ever of all time. But you want to have guys that have black type by their name. And I understand this recent vintage of NHL in this century is going to be a lot different than the previous century because there are guys that I watched in the 80s that you knew. I mean, they're automatic slam dunk Hall of Famers. All the Edmonton Oilers guys. I mean, Steve Yzerman, Dale Hawerchuk, Michel Goulet, Mike Bossy, Brian Trottier, Dennis Potvin. I mean, those are guys that, I mean, you don't even think twice. Whereas Zdeno Chara, all right, 22 years, but 22 years doesn't make you a Hall of Famer. I'm sorry. And for those who are watching, I'll give you an example. And people may fall out of their chair by me saying this, but this is the truth. Craig Biggio, no shade on him. He played 20 years in baseball. Got over 3,000 hits. And I understand 3,000 hits is the threshold. Never won an MVP. was an all-star, I believe, 8 of those 20 seasons. 8 of the 20 seasons? That's 40%. In my eyes, he is not a Hall of Famer. He's a compiler. And that's where Thornton and Chara, in my eyes, are. So that's no shade. That's not an insult to say that those guys aren't Hall of Famers. They're not. And I understand there's people that may argue and say, oh, Jay Reels, you don't know what you're talking about. You haven't watched these guys. I've watched Joe Thornton. Started with the Bruins at 18, played there for 4 or 5 years. I believe had a contract impasse. Got traded to San Jose, played a majority of his career in San Jose before playing, I believe, his last couple of years, he was in Toronto and Florida. So, yeah, I pay attention, people. I mean, I'm not going to be on here to talk out of my rear end. So, and then we know Chara, he was drafted by the Islanders and came full circle, and his last year was with the Islanders. Obviously, a lot in between. Ottawa, we got traded to, which is a terrible trade, as we know, and then played a bulk of his career with the Bruins, won a cup, and won Norris trophies there. But, again, if you're going to play 22 years and amass a lot of points, goals, etc., which is great, and it shows their durability, it shows their availability and reliability, and that's fantastic. But durability, availability, and reliability doesn't make you a Hall of Famer. The dominance, the multiple hardware, it helps if you win Stanley Cups too, but if you're an MVP, if you're a Norris Trophy winner, and I understand Duncan Keith won twice, I get it. And Rod Langway's in the Hall of Fame as a defensive defenseman. So I guess Duncan Keith maybe belongs there, and he won 3 cups where Langway didn't win any cups. Or he may have won in Montreal, because remember, he started his career in Montreal before he went to the Capitals. But, yeah. So Keith, I may be a little bit strong on, and maybe he's more deserving to be a Hall of Famer. The other 2 guys, I understand why. I'm not saying that those guys should never make it to the Hall of Fame. It's just me and how I rate or how I use those guys as the barometer for the Hall of Fame. That's all it is. So I know Brent's probably said a comment, which I'll get to in a second. But there's that. And then Alexander Mogilny. And he put up big numbers. One year, he said, knocking stuff over here. One year, he had 76 goals, 127 points, and I believe another year he had 107 points and was an excellent goal scorer. Buffalo Sabres, Devils, understood. But the reason why he's in the Hall of Fame is because he's the first player from, at that time, the Soviet Union to defect to play in the NHL, and obviously had a very big career. And has waited a long time. He retired, after the 05-06 season, I believe. So this has been a long time coming. So I can understand why he's a Hall of Famer. Now, he's a borderline Hall of Famer based on some of those numbers. You have a dominant year, and let's face it, 2 or 3 dominant years doesn't automatically make you a Hall of Famer if you're playing 10, 11 years. And here's another example. I got to use baseball because I know I use Biggio. And we know that he was a louse with the media and was not a good guy and maybe a tough guy to root for. But go look at the back of Albert Bell's baseball card, the former Cleveland Indian, White Sox, and Oriole, predominantly with the Indians. Look at his numbers and look at all the black type by his name. And you mean to tell me that guy's not a Hall of Famer? And this is what I mean. The guys that have played a long time, or the guys that have had a couple of dominant seasons, all right, fine. But a couple doesn't make you a Hall of Famer unless it was a Terrell Davis where it was condensed because of injury, where you played 6 years, but those 6 years, 5 of those 6 years were just off the charts. Sandy Koufax, Terrell Davis, etc. So how I look at it is that if you're not dominant, if you're not, when you hear that person's name, oh yeah, the Sherlock Hall of Famer. That's it. So when you bring up the name Alexander Ovechkin, duh. Or Sidney Crosby, duh. Or even, I understand he still has a ways to go, but Nathan McKinnon, he's more than on his way to being a Hall of Famer. Lock. But some of these other guys, because of compilers or because they're borderline, whatever. But I can see why Mogilny's getting in, more so because he was that first guy to defect, play in the league, had a very good career where he scored 440-something goals, 445, 447, whatever it was. So, yeah, I get it. And even though 500 may be that plateau that you want to hit, kind of like the home run record in baseball, not that it's a record, but the home run threshold. So, yeah, that's where I could see Mogilny getting in. And there's some others that also got to the Hall of Fame too. But, listen, am I going to knock the class of those guys? Absolutely not. Those guys played in the league forever. They were mainstays in the league. And God bless them. And congratulations to them. I'm not trying to throw cold water on their candidacy. But I'm calling it as I see it. Just being real about it. And again, I'm a small room guy. I'm not a big room guy. So that's just my explanation when it comes to that. All right, let me look at some comments and let me get to my big question before I wrap up here. Brent, the guys have to use it is the key, but everyone is 15 feet tall and bulletproof. Are you talking about the NBA player with the Achilles? I guess that's what you're referring to. If not my mistake, but I believe that's what it is. And then, interesting take, have to unfold compilers. Compilers are, I mean, listen, there are a million compilers in the Hall of Fame. A million. And that's fine. That's not to say that they are not worthy. That's not to say, but I rather have the dominant years. I rather have guys that were just lights out. And I understand not every 15, 18-year career is going to be filled with 16, 17. Like Albert Pujols is the best example of that. We know that his first 10 years, 11 years in St. Louis, the guy was money. The guy was already in the Hall of Fame. And when he went to Anaheim, and I understand he went back to St. Louis, and then he played for the Dodgers for a hot minute, I understand that the numbers pale in comparison. But we know that Albert Pujols is one of the great right-handed hitters that the sport has ever seen. And despite that, those Angel years with some injuries and not coming close to what he did in St. Louis, certainly may not be Hall of Fame worthy, but look at the black type by his name in those first 10, 11 years. And if I'm not mistaken, in those first 10 years, because let me see, he left after 2011 and he started 21. So he was there 11 years. In 9 of those 11 years, I believe he was MVP in the top 5 9 times. And then the other time, I think he was 9th. And after that, I think he was outside of the top 5. He was in the top 10. So in all 11 years in St. Louis, he was in the top 10 every year, I think except one. And he was in the top 5 9 of those years. I mean, if that's not Hall of Fame worthy, then I don't know what is. And if that's not dominance, then, I mean, what are we watching? So, and that's the example. So let me see. Albert Bell. Oh, yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah, Pavel Bure, Sergei Fedorov. I mean, Fedorov was a great two-way player. Bure, I mean, he was a blur on the ice. Had a bunch of 60-goal seasons. And, yeah, I'd like to see their numbers. Maybe I could look that up. We'll talk about that some other time because I know I want to kind of land this plane. Listen, I could go on forever, people, but there are a couple of things I got to tend to here as I get deeper into the afternoon. And not only that, but I got to get to my big question I want to ask you guys and gals, which is very, very important. And yes, the bike. 100% there on the sidelines. But, yeah, the Hall of Fame, it's always a fun debate. It's always a great topic of discussion on who's deserving, who's not, et cetera. So, and look at last year. Eli Manning didn't make it to the Hall of Fame. A lot of people thought that, he should have been the first ballot Hall of Fame. He won 2 Super Bowl MVPs, 2 Super Bowls, whatever. But look at his numbers in a regular season. He's 500 quarterback. Yes, but another compiler. He's got over 60,000 yards and how many touchdown passes, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, was that guy ever dominant? And I understand he had 2 of the great playoff runs as you could ever imagine, beating Brady twice and stopping an undefeated season in the process. I mean, how could you argue that? I think he's going to get in one day. Who knows when that day will be? Will it be this coming year? Since this past season was his first year on the ballot? Maybe. But other than that, to me, he wasn't a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he's going to get in because he won 2 Super Bowls and was an MVP. Now, Jim Plunkett won 2 Super Bowls and was an MVP in one of the 2 games, and he's not in the Hall of Fame. And he was a former number 1 pick overall, too, New England Patriots. But I digress. All right, let me get to my last thing, people. Very important, the content. Of course, I do the podcast twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays, as you see scrolling at the bottom there. The live stream every Wednesday, too, as you know. And a lot of this content is now going to be future posted content, as I've talked about critique videos, which I've been experimenting with here. And it's been a little bit difficult because there's a couple of loopholes that I'm trying to get through because I'm using other people's content and I got to watch out for copyright strikes and things of that nature. And although I think I have a way to navigate through that, and a lot of that's through editing where I'm doing all the editing, people. So this is all on me. It's not as if I have an editor or a team or anything like that. Eventually, that's the goal. So I did say at the start of the third quarter, I was going to have that, and I still may have that, but I'm still trying to go through the guidelines and the logistics of things. So when I talk about critique videos, there's other content that I want to critique, good or bad. And no, not that I'm going to denigrate or come out guns a-blazing. Forgive me for using that term, because I don't have any hate towards anybody or anybody else doing content. That's to me, that's not the point. It's just when I critique it, it's just pointing out some things that I would rather see as someone who creates content and wants to see more analysis than more of maybe the analytic stuff. So that's just an example. But whether it's that, do you want to see more shorts on the YouTube channel? Do you want to see less shorts? Do you want to see more commentary? Do you want to see more of guys, if you've followed other channels such as That's Good Sports, he's a guy that does commentary on all sports. Or to use a basketball reference, I know Kenny For Real is a guy that has a ton of followers and talks basketball, and mainly it's just him talking. He may put up some graphics from time to time. Do you want to see more content like that? Please feel free, leave a comment. If not, for those watching a replay, I'll be more than happy. I'm going to post this on my social media too as we move it along here, as we get into the second part of the year, third quarter, etc., because I want to get a pulse, and also more vlogs. I'm going to do some lifestyle stuff, which I know is a little bit off the beaten path, but it does tie into what it is that I'm doing as far as being a content creator goes. So there's that I'm going to work with. And yeah, I'm curious to know what is on your mind. Again, just like you see there, you want more live streams, you want more in the evening, you want it less during the lunchtime. I mean, I don't know. And this is all stuff that I'm trying to compile here. I'm doing my own little market research. That's all right. I'm doing my own little market research here. So, and I plan to do more of that here in the days and weeks to come. So it's out there, people. Let me know what you think. I'm more than happy to hear whatever suggestions, whatever feedback, input, etc. Of course, I'll take everything into consideration. That doesn't mean I'm going to automatically sign off on it. But again, what type of content do you want to see? Do you like the content what you see currently? Do you want to see more? Do you want to see more of a particular sport? Do you want to see, like I said, more live streams, less shorts? And I'm actually thinking about also using a Patreon, which I may put more shorts and more exclusive content for those who are going to sign with Patreon, because obviously trying to generate income here as an independent podcaster / content creator, etc. I got to pay the bill somehow, right, people? So all that is being thrown at you, and I understand it may be a lot, but please decipher it, regurgitate it, digest it. Let me know. I see a comment there. I'll check it in a second, and certainly will take it into consideration as to your thoughts. Yes. Dogs mean loving. If my wife sees that, she'll go crazy. She'll love that. So thank you, Brent. I appreciate that from Ontario. And I know earlier you posted a comment. I don't want to overlook that. And let me see if I've overlooked any comments here, because you were talking about, yes, here it is. It's currently 70 degrees. Wow. For us Canucks, yeah. Wow, to think. So it's in the upper 70s. And you're 100 miles west of Toronto. Are you parallel to Toronto? Or are you a little bit north and west? I'm curious. So, Brent, and please, I appreciate you joining. Obviously, you've been very supportive here. Thank you so much for what you've done. I see a thumbs up there. I guess that's a good thing. And, of course, I'm streaming this on my other accounts, too, which I'm going to start doing as well, because, yes, I want to increase the YouTube profile, as you well know. More subscribers. I want more people to be a part of this channel. I want to start monetizing through this particular platform as well. But I understand I got to give and show love to the Instagrams of the world. And I'm using my personal Instagram. I'm not using the J Reels Podcast Instagram account, and the same for my Facebook. TikTok I'm going to get to as well. But, yeah, it's one of those things that I'm experimenting with the other social media accounts, because, yes, I got to get the word out there. I got to get myself out there, and I'm well aware of that. I know I'm trying to stick more to YouTube. For those who follow me on TikTok, I know I haven't posted a lot, but I appreciate your patience. And pretty much what I post on YouTube, I post on TikTok there, but I know I got to switch it up, scramble it up as well. But, yeah, you guys are tremendous. And before I close it out, it goes without saying how much I appreciate you all. And let me get to that right now. Any last thoughts in the chat room, please feel free to chime in, add. As I mention all the time, please subscribe, like, leave a comment, share with your family, friends, foes, frenemies. Take a screenshot, send it to me on socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the J Reels Podcast, or J Reels on Instagram, Twitter, J Reels1, just a number. And, of course, you can hit me up with a DM with any questions, comments, suggestions, the old-fashioned way, the jrailspodcast@gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, as you all know. You know about the live stream every Wednesday at noon. I have to bring that up, as well as the latest edition of the podcast coming tomorrow, NBA Draft Round 1, baseball. Let's see if the Mets finally snap their streak, losing streak, that is, and anything and everything that's going to come down the pike. Preview the NHL Draft a little bit. Obviously, it's going to be Islander dominant with yours truly. But as always, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for your contribution. Spread the word to those who like sports, loves content, lifestyle content, no matter what. Again, it goes without saying how much I appreciate you all. And, of course, whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. In the blood, in the DNA, talking sports since birth. Nothing but passion, fire, energy, fury in front of this microphone and camera every Wednesday live at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. As you well know, my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are. The J-Reels live stream always comes live, correct, direct, and in full effect. And let me get to this last comment before I bid adieu. Brent, you the man. Thumbs up to you. Thank you so much, as always. So from the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to South Pacific and all points beyond, including north of the border there, up in Ontario to my guy, Brent. Peace, love, and God bless everybody. Until tomorrow on the podcast, until next week on the live stream, on the flip, baby.